Let's be real for a second. One of the absolute hardest things in product design is just making a decision, right? You can have the most brilliant team, the most amazing ideas, but if you can't pick a path and move forward, you're just stuck. So in this explainer, we're going to unpack the psychology that paralyzes teams and show you the mindset that senior designers use to cut right through the noise and actually build with confidence.
Have you ever been in one of those meetings? You know the one? The room is electric, Post-it notes are everywhere, the whiteboard is covered in genius, and then you walk out an hour later and nothing. 0 decisions were made. It's such a common story. So why? Why do so many genuinely great ideas just seem to die in committee?
Okay, let's just get right to the heart of it. The problem almost never is a lack of creativity or a shortage of smart ideas. Nope. The real bottleneck, the place where all that amazing innovation just grinds to a halt, is in the process of deciding. It's a how problem, not a what problem.
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at why having more ideas can actually make things worse. Then, we'll dive into the science of why our brains kind of struggle with choice. From there, we'll talk about the mental traps we all fall into, and I'll give you a super practical playbook for designing better decisions. And we'll wrap it all up with the single most important mindset shift you need to make. Let's dive in.
All right, first up, Section 1, the innovation paradox, or as I like to call it, when more is less. We all know this phase of the process, right? The big brainstorm, the workshop. The goal is to generate as many ideas as humanly possible. That's called divergent thinking. And honestly, most teams are pretty fantastic at it. The problem is what comes next, convergent thinking. That's where you have to narrow it all down and actually make a choice. And that is where everything just stops. But here's the key. This isn't your team's fault. It's not a failure. It's just a predictable feature of how our brains are wired. We are literally designed to get overwhelmed.
So if we're all just wired to get overwhelmed, what is actually happening up there in our brains? Well, that brings us to Section 2. Our brain's hidden limits. This is the real why behind all that frustrating indecision.
To really get why we get stuck, we've got to talk about something called working memory. The easiest way to think about it is like your brain's RAM, or maybe a little temporary sticky note. It's the mental workspace you use for conscious thought, for juggling ideas, and for actively processing information to make a decision. It's absolutely critical, but it's also incredibly limited. And just how limited are we talking? Well, cognitive science has a number for us. 4 plus or minus 1. That's it. That's the big secret. On average, our conscious mind can only hold and actively think about 3 to 5 distinct pieces of information at the same time. Any more than that, and our whole system just starts to overload and fail. I mean, when you think about it, that is a shockingly small number, isn't it? And you can see this concept in action right here. On the left, you've got a form asking for 9 things all at once. For your brain, that's an immediate red alert. Cognitive overload. But on the right, that exact same information is chunked into 2 simple steps. It's the same exact task, but just by respecting our brain's 4 plus 1 limit, it feels 1,000 times easier. This isn't some little UI trick, it's a fundamental principle of good design.
Okay, so now we get our brain's limitations. How do we actually apply that? This brings us to Section 3, the psychology of choice. This is where we learn how to help our users and, our own teams make much better decisions. You've probably heard of the famous jam study. So when a store put out 24 different kinds of jam, tons of people stopped to look. They were curious, but almost nobody actually bought anything. Then, when they cut the options way down to just 6 varieties, sales went up tenfold. Tenfold! This is the paradox of choice, right there in front of you. Giving people fewer, better options doesn't limit them. It actually empowers them to make a choice. What this really means is that as designers, our job is to be choice architects. We're not just pushing pixels around. We're literally shaping the environment where decisions get made. And probably our most powerful tool for this is the smart default. You see it all the time, right? An app pre-selects standard shipping, or a software tool highlights the most popular plan. By making the best choice the easiest choice, we slash decision fatigue and we guide users toward a better outcome. But here's the thing. Even when we know all this stuff, our own brains can still lead us astray. And that brings us to Section 4, decision traps. These are the cognitive biases that can derail even the smartest product teams. So the big one, and I guarantee you've seen this 100 times, is confirmation bias. This is our brain's natural, default tendency to look for, to notice,
and to favor any piece of information that confirms what we already believe. For designers, this is so dangerous because it's way too easy to fall in love with our own solutions and then just subconsciously hunt for any little scrap of evidence that proves us right. And this is exactly what it sounds like in practice. You've been working on a new feature, you're attached to it, you think it's brilliant. Then, in a user test, you hear something even vaguely positive, and that little voice in your head goes, "Aha, see? I knew they'd love it," even if the user was just making an offhand comment about the color of a button. We filter reality to match what we want to be true.
So how do we fight this? Well, the solution is pretty simple, but it does take discipline. You have to actively try to be proven wrong. Seriously, instead of asking questions that confirm what you believe, like, "So, do you like this new feature?" Ask questions that could blow your hypothesis out of the water. Ask things like, "What's the most confusing part of this page?" Or, "If you had a magic wand, what's the first thing you'd change here?"
Okay, we've covered the problem, the psychology, and the pitfalls. Now for the fun part, the solutions. Section 5 is all about designing for decisions. This is your practical playbook. Think of this as a simple checklist you can apply to your work starting today. 1. Minimize cognitive load. Are you chunking information? Are you really respecting that 4+1 rule? 2. Design for recognition, not recall. Don't make users remember stuff. Show them their options, like their recently viewed items, instead of making them recall a product name. And 3. Limit choices with smart defaults. Just pre-select the best choice for 80% of your users and eliminate a totally unnecessary decision for them. And that brings us to our final and, honestly, most important section, the senior designer's mindset. Because the tools and tactics are great, but what really separates a senior-level designer is how they think. This is the big takeaway. Okay, here's the bottom line. Thinking like a senior designer means you've got to shift from tactics to strategy. Your job isn't just to design a pretty interface, your job is to design the decision itself. It's about understanding the psychology behind a framework, like an impact versus effort matrix, not just blindly using it. It's about being able to kill your favorite idea without breaking a sweat because you are obsessed with the user's problem, not your own solution. And it's about ruthlessly eliminating all the trivial little choices so that everyone, your users and your team, can focus their precious mental energy on what truly matters. And look, if there is only one single thought I can leave you with today, let it be this. This is the mantra that separates good designers from truly great product leaders. Fall in love with the problem, not your solution. Because when you do that, all the hard decisions, they suddenly get a whole lot clearer.